when I was young, I also did not know that you could pursue it as a career. That's the case for most Filipino kids because we don't have anyone who was a scientist. You read about the science, but you don't see the people, the scientists who are doing it.
Yeah.
And then if meron man, the scientists are, don't look like you. They are like old white men or dead. Mostly dead, di ba? Sina Galileo Galilei, di ba? Or si
Yeah.
Isaac Newton. So it's another world, di ba? It's a big leap to think
Yeah.
na something that you can actually do.
You're listening to Drawing on Hope, where we talk to inspiring people who'll paint for us their vision of a better world. I'm Albert, co-founder of Pushpin, a social impact creative agency that uses drawings and stories to help make things make sense. Our guest this episode is Reina Reyes, Space Science Missions Bureau Director at PhilSA, or Philippine Space Agency, and co-founder and executive director of Pinoy Scientists, a platform that aims to inspire the next generation of Filipino scientists. As we join in on the conversation, Reina talks about what sparked her fascination for science and how that led her to building a career in astrophysics. Let's jump right in.
All kids are naturally curious, right? So in my case, merong early fascination with space, like course stars, planets, black holes, di ba? Very strange things that you can be sucked in, and where do you go? Yeah. And then of course the universe as a whole, so big and we're so small. I remember also having like postcards of the planets. Merong parang instead of athletes or basketball players na cards, parang statistics ng mga planets, ano niya, minimum, lowest temperature, highest temperature, the density, pressure, and then these beautiful pictures. And then just fascinated by just how different the conditions are there, and that maybe we can some later on travel to these planets. Um, I also had a phase where I wanted to be an astronaut. I think, again, as many kids do. Then eventually, uh, parang yun nga, I realize now what I'm really interested in is in studying the universe, not necessarily exploring the universe as an astronaut. Um, but yeah, many decades after, right now, in a way, full circle, I eventually pursued astrophysics, astronomy, research, and also I'm now with the Philippine Space Agency, where among other things, we're developing and aspiring for a Filipino astronaut program. So if not me, but the next, the younger ones who would want to go, we're here to support.
I'm curious about that phrase that you said a couple of times earlier. Sabi mo, as all kids are naturally curious about science. And I experienced that myself. I used to collect yung mga planet cards also, but also yung nasa Ovaltine, there were these dinosaur facts
Yes,
na
dinosaurs.
cards
I also
you could collect.
dioramas.
Yeah, so dinosaurs, ganyan. I see it in my kids as well and how fascinated they are with the natural sciences. But what do you think enabled you to make the leap from I liked it as a kid and then I fully committed to it as a career? And how is it that maybe other kids stopped or didn't pursue it na after a certain point? Like, what's the difference there?
Sure. So when I was young, I also did not know that you could pursue it as a career,
Hmm.
right? And I think yun nga, that's the case for most kids, most Filipino kids, because we don't have, we don't know anyone who was a scientist, especially before this was pre-internet. Can you imagine the pre-internet? Baka, yeah, I'm 40, I just turned 42. So, 80s, di ba? We had Encyclopedia Britannica, ganon. And all these people, actually, you read about, di ba? What is one thing, you read about the science, but you don't see the people, the scientists who are doing it.
Yeah.
And then if meron man, the scientists don't look like you. They are like old white men or dead, mostly dead, di ba? Sina Galileo Galilei, di ba? Or
Yeah.
si Isaac Newton, for physics, Charles Darwin. So it's another world, di ba? It's a big leap to think
Yeah.
na something that you can actually do even if you're. So I went through phases where people always ask you, what would you like to be when you grow up? And I had answers. I had an answer. So yung astronaut, very short phase. Then I realized I'm I couldn't pass the height limit.
Height.
Then okay, sige, more pragmatic tayo. Then I wanted to be a lawyer. Um, and then on hindsight, it's because we had a family friend who was a lawyer, who was, entertaining, who was
Mhm.
well respected by my parents. Diba? They spoke highly of him kasi, yun nga, he's good, he helps people. So parang I wanted to be like him. But I was not interested in law or courts, diba? And then for a time, I wanted to be an architect. And again, I trace it back to I had an older cousin who was studying to be an architect. And he stayed with us for a while. So nakikita ko yung ginagawa niya, the drafting of the plans, gumagawa rin siya ng parang mga illustration board model houses. So parang ang cool, di ba? And then I wanted to be like him. He actually helped build our house. And then finally, I wanted to be an entrepreneur, businesswoman, just like my parents. Kasi we had a hardware store, like typical Filipino Chinese family. But all this time, I was interested in science. They supported my interest in science. I competing on quiz bees. I mean, the whole thing. But yun nga, hindi nag-enter na in my mind that this is a career that you can
Yeah.
actually pursue until much later. So in my case, I just learned about this school for kids who like science called the Philippine Science High School. The main campus is in Quezon City. Now there are campuses all around the country. And I just told my parents I want to apply there. And, they're open minded enough to let me. They actually called the school and asked, how do we apply? Okay, you get a form, back in the day. And yes, and only in high school because there were teachers who know about it can guide you on careers in science, and there are actually alumni who were scientists and engineers. But that's only when um, the idea came that, oh, this is pala something I can do as for my career and for life if I pursue this path. That's why, in a way, Pinoy Scientists was born, or that's why we like sharing about the stories of Filipino scientists, because that's how the young people can see actual paths and then all the different ways you can become scientist,
Yeah.
researcher, part of the STEM field.
I was thinking about this concept that I learned from talking to mga political scientists, yung concept daw nung Overton window, which is
Okay.
the range of subjects and topics that's considered normal or acceptable. And I was thinking about how you were talking about these different options that you were exploring, whether it's being a lawyer, should I be an architect, should I be an entrepreneur. I think it really just goes to show that the things that we're exposed to, the narratives that we hear and see, really forms our worldview of what's possible even for us. Like you, laking Encyclopedia Britannica and the Time Life books rin ako. Every time there's a scientist, it's always Caucasian, male, makapal yung balbas. So parang,
Definitely.
hindi ako to. Right?
Yes, yes,
So that
yes.
also kind of excludes you from certain paths as a way. Um,
Definitely. And that's the actually next part of the story. Because even when I was in high school, I learned that I can pursue this path. But my role models were the white Caucasian males, Albert Einstein, Richard Feynman, the authors who write these popular science books. My conscious mindset is then I have to go where they are to do that, to be a scientist, to do what they do, to discover the secrets of the universe. And where is that? Is in the United States, and that's always been at the back of my mind. And I ended up um, doing my graduate studies there at Princeton, where Einstein also worked and lived. And then only later, then di ba, the next parang level of evolution of the ideas. Well, you don't have to, right? In fact, what we want is a world where we can do science here in the Philippines to contribute to the global knowledge, to global science, to be part, because science is global, so we can be part of the global science community from anywhere,
Yeah.
and since and from the Philippines. So yeah, hence Pinoy scientists, and also um, yeah, still an ongoing, right, an ongoing conversation, an ongoing struggle, ongoing advocacy to make our country a better place to do science.
Well, earlier we were talking about the cultural stories and the things we're exposed to as being a barrier to going into the field of sciences. I think over the years, you've evolved from not just being a scientist, but also through Pinoy scientists and even your speaking engagements and other roles. You've really become a strong advocate for science communication
Mm, mm.
and telling the story of science in the Philippines. Why do you find it just as important as, doing the science work itself?
Yeah, that's a big part of it. And you should also mention that this image of scientists, what a scientist could be. So we mentioned already Caucasian male. So it's also gendered. And then doubly
Mm-mm.
pa, you have a Filipino and female, or coming from different background. So that's why it's so important to have role models across different life paths. But at the same time, um, there are challenges to that. I mean, we'll get to that.
No,
Let's go back.
let's get into it now, Reina.
Let's get into it now.
Well, let's get into it now. So we've identified the stories that we're exposed to, the cultural narratives. That's
Mm,
one. And I'm really just looking at that even as a Filipino.
mm,
You've also brought up the gender din kasi Filipino
mm.
na tapos babae pa. What are the
Yeah,
what are the barriers? What are the challenges that you're trying to, I guess, break open and advocate for?
right. So so I'm still learning. I'm still
Mm,
learning.
mm.
But as you reflect on it and think about your own experience, others' experience, it becomes clear that there are so many barriers um across life, across parang life stage, right? So when you talk about cultural norms, it starts at childhood, and we touched on it earlier, what's normal, diba? And that already keeps many young girls from pursuing the field because they can't even see themselves in it or belonging in it, that's even a possibility. And we're losing, half the talent pool of the
Right.
world. And not just that, but the diversity in perspectives and creative talents. And it starts, very young. Boys are given, trucks, toys, girls are given dolls, and so on. Um, but then some of us, actually, for me, I think that was part of it, that I was not, I'm a bit oblivious to this, parang, to this, the what you have to be because you're a girl,
Mhm.
or whatever, that I just pursued it, right? So there are those of us who, for one reason or another, pursue it in a way. It also speaks to our where we are now, right? Because even just decades or years back, you can't even go to college,
Okay.
or go to, or take these courses, or go to graduate school, because it's only for men. So now there's these possibilities over time, but still, once you get in, especially if in still male dominated fields, like physics or engineering, you find yourself in an environment, a culture that is not necessarily welcoming or
Yeah.
inviting or empowering, to someone like you, because you don't, you know, you don't um, jive with the expectations. So for example, one common assumption or mindset is that you have to be, it's like you have to have a certain personality type matapang ka, right? Or you're one of
Okay.
the boys, right? So we have to conform to this particular type, be accepted, to be part of the in group, right? To have those
Okay.
privileges that come with that, to be respected. So you get to, again, if you happen to be that, then fine, right? It's still parang there are levels. But if not, then you're perceived as weak. You're perceived
Okay.
as other, this, or mahina, right? And instead of getting the support, yeah, many women, talented women, get driven away from the field.
So you can't be a girly, and I say this with quotes, like you can't be a girly scientist. Yung mahilig sa pink, ganyan. Hindi ka sa
Yes, wake up or dressing up, right? And it comes in many different ways. You have to conform. And there's also, of course, the entrenched machismo culture, and it comes
Mm-mm.
up insidiously in cases, for example, where it can get to the level of bullying, harassment, even sexual harassment. And in those cases, I've heard people say those who were harassed are unfavorably compared to those who were not, women who were not harassed, because these women were strong, right?
My
It's
gosh.
because itong mga strong women, hindi sila nagpapaharas. Essentially blaming the victims, blaming the
Right.
women for being responsible, that there's this there's this problem. They cannot even say harassment. It's just, we don't want to be dealing with this. If we were all men, we don't have to deal with this, right? And
Right.
if all women are strong, then we don't have to deal with this. Um, rather than yeah, listening and supporting and addressing the issues, and yeah, and changing for the better, so that we have a safer and more inclusive environments and communities for working and also for learning for our young students and scientists. And sadly, yeah, this happens in many places, but are not it's not spoken about. It's usually, hush hush, because you don't want to uh, ta- ta- tarnish the reputation of the institutions, or of individual people, sweep things under the rug. Those who are most likely women who were negatively affected, they choose to leave, and pursue other things. Again, we're losing the talent, we're losing the diversity that we need for this sustainable change, for more equal and inclusive science. So it's like a vicious cycle that has to be
Yeah.
cut.
That's a lot of complex and interrelated challenges. Even beyond what you said earlier, where from youth, yung cultural barriers. I don't know if the word is, once you're fortunate enough to actually get in,
You're one of the lucky ones.
lucky ones. So parang I don't even know if that's the right
They're,
adjective to use, right? But once you're in, the
you're one of the
struggle
few ones.
doesn't stop
One of the
there,
few,
right?
one of the rare ones. Yes, yes.
Yeah, one of the rare ones. So once you're in, the struggle doesn't stop there, because now you're faced with a range of interpersonal barriers, from passive aggressiveness to outright harassment. The blame when you speak up is shifted onto the person who experienced it, rather than holding those accountable who were actually the ones who did it. What I'm also hearing is it's not just the people who were involved, but also the people around them who might have created enabling environments. That sounds like a lot of deeply embedded barriers and hurdles that make it more difficult for women to get into a field that's already difficult to get into in the first place, whether you're a male or a female scientist. You mentioned that the cost of not addressing these barriers is we lose out on the diversity, we lose out on the perspective, and we lose out on half the talent pool that you could have. Going beyond that pa, what do you see as the thing that we lose because we don't have that diversity? Like, what do we miss out on pag wala kami nung diverse perspective, the creativity, the experience, the know-how?
At face value, it's
Yeah.
like there's no significant loss at all. Because if we've been doing, in a way, it's been like that, like even in the past,
Mm.
right? It's all men, and we've had these, great milestones, and these geniuses. So then it's not a big deal. But how I think about it now is actually it's an immense loss that is that we cannot imagine, that we cannot really grasp yet because of the lack of imagination, because there's really no it hasn't happened yet. But I believe that when it happens, it will be when we do get, you know uh, equal representation, balanced representation in the sciences, as in all fields, leadership, right? um it will be a radically different world. In It will be a radically different way of doing things, and the impact of the science as well, right, will be different, because we will care about different things more. um we will also have that wider representation in the people we serve, in the solutions that we bring with it.
Right.
And just like in the pandemic times, right, you can see the contrast between the female leaders,
And how
how
they
they
responded.
responded. Imagine multiplying that to the world. Maybe we wouldn't be in this muck we are in now as we speak. So it's really that radically different way of even doing science. Even the way we do science will be different, because how
Right.
we're doing it now, this objective, that I'm a scientist and I'm just observing and I don't care if I harm what I'm observing. That's the legacy of this, male dominated perspective of science. And so it could be radically different, even to the fundamental level.
I hear what you're saying. It can be hard to imagine precisely because it hasn't happened yet. But as you were describing, how fundamentally things might change, and we see glimpses of it in how you mentioned COVID as an example, and how female leaders responded
Right.
very differently and had very different outcomes as a result.
And may also our female scientists also, right?
Yeah,
Jane,
yeah.
even here in the Philippines, many examples.
So it made me think about how there are so many different problems we have in the world, and we've had them for years, whether it's climate change, which we've been talking about for decades, diba? um, and what I'm taking away from you talking about what we might lose out on if we don't let more people in is that the problems also remain. They still
And
exist. In some
more
ways
complex,
they're
bigger,
exacerbated and more complicated, become
bigger,
bigger.
tangled
And so
together.
maybe the thinking there is you can't really expect to solve the world's problems if the people who are in power remain the same people in power doing the same things, right?
Same also doing the science and finding the solutions.
Right.
Mm.
It's not
Yes.
even the finding the solutions. Maybe even it's just what are the questions that we are asking, diba?
Also, yes.
How do we
Also, yes.
frame the problem might be
Yes, yes.
different.
The different perspectives, right? So even when we that talk about being Filipino, being part of the global South versus again the predominance of
Right.
the science from the first world advanced countries. Again, if we had more voice, then we would maybe there's a way to solving climate change. We are the most vulnerable, so the solutions will come from us.
Right.
But the resources and the power is so imbalanced right now. But again, maybe the world is realizing that. So that's also the balance. The science would be radically different if the people who are
Yeah.
doing it are also representing the the whole, human species.
You mentioned also earlier that you still remain hopeful.
Mm.
So where does your hope come from? What are the signs of hope for you?
Mm. The signs of hope is also, the next generation. Well, our generation, the next generation, think, very differently already than the previous generation. Of
Yeah.
course, the challenge is not to, how do you um not latch on to that old views. And of course, it will take, there's it will, there are, again, still thinking about this, but
Mm-mm.
there's like an organic, slow process. But at the same time, there's how do you accelerate that? So one way I'm talking about it is, there's borrowing from Brene Brown, the researcher and
Mm-hmm.
author. There's something, there's different types of power, and there's the traditional power over, that's fear based, and
Yeah.
these usually male senior leaders have that authority, and they have power over the rest, and especially with a large power difference with the younger ones, not tenured faculty, and even bigger for like students, young instructors, and they can abuse that power and even cause harm to the people they're supposed to be supporting and serving. But I'm hopeful because there's also this, what Brene Brown calls power with,
Mm-hmm.
which is based on collaborative leadership, respect, empathy. And it doesn't have to be, your formal authority, but anyone could be a leader, and everyone could work together to challenge the entrenched culture. But it takes courage
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
there's always a risk, right? And it takes collaboration, and organizing, having allies, and more and importantly, men who will be willing to speak up and use their voices and influence, because they have that already. They don't even realize it, right? That's actually where most people are. They don't even realize it because it's invisible to them. They don't
It's taken for granted.
and for granted, and they also don't. So they don't understand why. Why is there a problem? So it would take them to step back and really listen to understand, and that
Yeah.
empathy, and then use their power to support women, and push for reforms to ensure safe and inclusive spaces for everyone.
And in the meantime, for those of us who are in the current generation, it's really also making sure that we don't inherit as well the mindsets and the habits and the problems of the previous ones, so we can lay the groundwork better for the next generation.
And give them
You're
space and hold
yeah.
space for.
You're
Yeah.
you're doing that as well right now with the Philippine Space Agency, where you're really doing pioneering work, at least for the Philippines, directing the space missions. And maybe you can tell us a bit more about what is it that the agency does, and why is it important for a country like the Philippines to have our own space agency? Because I feel like, and I think I mentioned this before we were recording, some people might be asking, in a developing country where we already have so many urgent challenges here on the ground, why should we need but to invest time and resources and look up to outer space? So tell us about the work you do, and how do you usually answer questions like that?
Sure. Yeah, this is actually the most common question about the Philippine Space Agency, or PhilSA for short. But the one big part of the answer is that we need actually not just look up, is actually, of course, part of it. But the bigger part of what we do at the agency is actually we look down on Earth. So we use our satellites in space, our eyes in the sky, to see what's happening here on the ground. And so that's actually very practical tool that we need to monitor our typhoons and other hazards, landslides, and can actually use these satellite maps to identify where the rescuer should look for possible survivors. So that's very on the ground response, but enabled by something out in space, and that's the value in having our own space agency, developing our assets in space and taking care of that, and also our capacity to access them, use them, and translate them to services, to benefits for our country. So that's just one hazard. Of course, food security, agriculture. Again, we can learn so much from our satellite images of our crops, about drought, about we should how we should manage our resources. In fact, we are building our very own operational satellite. It will be our biggest one yet. It's called MULA, the Multi-Spectral Land Assessment Satellite. But MULA also, of course, in Filipino means beginning, and also in Ilocano, it's, I think, a plant. So for our food security, and we have a team of engineers who are helping build it in the UK, and it's set for launch later this year or early next year, depending on whether we get the slot in the rocket that will bring it up there. And hopefully we get the date soon after that. It all works well. We get the data, and so actually, I'm now also leading the team that is getting the pipeline ready and tested, so that once we have the data from the satellite, we can process it and then make it available to researchers and to the general public as soon as possible.
I want to
It's
double click on that a
more
bit more,
complicated than
Reina.
I just made it sound, but yes, that's the idea.
No, no, I wanna double click on that. I'm fine with complicated, but I also, you have to be patient rin with me, and I'm sure with some of the listeners who might not be as deeply knowledgeable in the sciences. But I wanna double click on that. Like,
Sure.
what are some of the specific ways na space science and space technology is either already or can make an impact sa everyday life namin as Filipinos? Like, what are some of the things na inaaral nyo about I don't know, drought and food security when you look down on Earth? Share with us a bit more about that.
Sure. First of all, maybe the most used that everyone, or most of our those who are listening has used space technologies in their location based services. So if you use Grab, right, or Waze or Google Maps, and you see where you are, where you want to go, or your delivery to get to your house, that location signals from a constellation of satellites orbiting the Earth. We call it GPS, right? Global Positioning System, and it's so accurate now that the rider can find you exactly where you are. So that's very ubiquitous technology now that we don't even think about it. But that's ours. That's from satellites in space. Another is, of course, communications. So we can send signals to the satellite, and then they bounce it back, and then so you get signal from one part of one location to another. And we are also developing plans to have our very own Philippine communications satellite that we can use, especially for in after disasters, when the telecom the towers
Right.
are unusable, right? Um, and then you have these we've been talking about, these satellites with cameras, essentially cameras
Mm-hmm.
in the sky, so they can look down, and then these cameras have different sensors, different bands, so that we can study different things, like for example vegetation. We can see drought. We can actually monitor it and forecast it, of course, depending on your models. But the Philippine Space Agency has had a project, an initiative with the Department of Agriculture, where they actually use these maps to identify and target the farmers who will be most affected, and and prioritize them for
Wow.
benefits, for example. We also generate maps after disasters. I mentioned landslides, but also floods to monitor the extent of the floods. Maybe next we'd like to also see if we can estimate the depth or how high the flood is and give this information to the responders to NDRMC. Um, Again, it's more complicated, but that's the vision, right? That's the objective. That's the goal.
Yeah.
All these different agencies, government agencies, will work together, and we can provide the timely information needed for decision making and for efficient response.
I think it certainly makes the case for why we need to build that capability on our own as a country, no? Kasi specifically the ones you mentioned about drought, about food security, about disaster response, will anyone care enough about what's happening here in our own backyard na they'll develop something specifically for us? And if they do they really understand our local context enough to be able to address it properly? So what you're
Correct.
saying here now is that really science isn't just a nice to have. Yung parang pag-develop nation na tayo, tsaka na natin problemahin. But it's really a
Mhm.
capability we really need to have because it forms the backbone of so much of what we do as Filipinos and how we move around in our country, our daily lives. Important talaga si science. It's not just a nice to have.
Definitely.
Looking ahead, what are the other possibilities that excite you the most about where space science is headed in the Philippines?
Right. I mentioned earlier what we've been talking about are getting data from space to Earth. Now, the other direction, personally, also leading is as in my role is the Earth to space. Of course, close to my heart is astronomy. So to study the planets, even planets outside the solar system, galaxies, stars. Of course, with a growing astrophysics community in the country. So I'm excited about that. More and more astronomers who trained abroad are coming back. Many are being trained right now. So the tribe is growing, and we're I mean, the nice thing is that we're a friendly bunch. So we're actually collaborating and pushing this field forward. We're like the first batch, di ba? Parang first batch and then papalaguin. I don't take for granted because there's also many cases where, nagkakanya-kanya and even nagkakaroon ng turfing or competition. So hopefully it stays that way, that we're one big community. Um, Also looking up to protect our satellites, to protect assets in space. Because space is also congested, unfortunately, with traffic na space, right? Traffic dito, traffic sa space. So there's something called space traffic management and space situational awareness. And so we also can use our telescopes to to monitor the debris and the and then direct the satellites to maneuver. So that's looking up as well. And then of course there's the sending things up, things and people. So it's are the astronauts. We're discussing with these different stakeholders and companies. And then we have, our aspiring astronauts, and we even want to, inspire the next generation to want to be part of this journey, this adventure. So we're starting actually this year with simulated missions. These are called analog missions. So we have analog astronauts. So we just put them in a small place and then pretend that they're out in space. So they're isolated. They have missions they have to do, test their vitals, their health. So they have a crew, college level up to professional level crew members, and it could go from several days to weeks to months. They do this globally, and we have Filipinos who actually participate in these, and they are actually helping us design our own and implement our own analog missions here in the Philippines, and and then maybe even do like junior astronaut camps, right? And inspire the next generation. And sabi nga nila, there are called there are fields called entry waste STEM, like gateway drug. So astronomy is one. I think space is one because it naturally excites and it sparks the curiosity of all of young people, of all people of all ages. They end up doing other things like engineering, right? Because then you got to build rockets or physics, the budol ng stars. Ano ko lang pa when I got here, di ba? Pero I will just stick to it and I become an astrophysicist. Um, so so that's what we want to do. We want to use space and astronomy to to entice our young people to STEM careers.
Hopefully, because of your position, that means mag-a-adjust yung height requirement for astronauts?
Yes, ngayon actually it's become so accessible that you can be in a I think they had one in a wheelchair. In a wheelchair. Go up into
Wow, that's amazing. All right, so we're we're recording this conversation during International Women's Month, and we saw that the theme for this year by the Philippine Commission on Women is Lead Like a Babaylan. And it made us think about how you show up as a leader at work as well. We wanted to ask you, how do you approach leadership and what do you see as your responsibility and role, not just in the agency you work in, but even in the greater field of science and in the community?
Yes, thank you for the question. No, so again, this is something that's I'm a journey, right? I'll go back to what I touched on earlier, the difference between power over and power with.
Yeah.
So I try to um yeah, I try to go with a power with. Of course, it's a mix, right? Sometimes you have to use your, and that's really where I am. I guess that's what I'm 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 learning. How do you balance? When do you strategically use your power over, and when do you strategically use your power with? Um, because work life is complicated. But yes, I actually tend to be more, I hope I tend to listen more. I'm learning to do that, to listen more, to start with understanding, um to be open um to inputs, to feedback, to suggestions, and actually try to empower the people I work with, my team, to come up with the solutions themselves, for example. And then I just say, okay, go, right? Just do it. So that balance. And my hope is, of course, that I'm um, giving them that support and opportunity to as well. Also, I think my experience, or yeah, in mentoring as a scientist, as a professor, that's a big part of, you want to mentor and train the next generation of scientists, and I bring that to my work as well.
Since you bring up the next generation of scientists, what do you hope young Filipinos, and especially young girls who are curious and still have that sense of wonder about science, what do you hope that they see when they look
Mm.
at someone like you who's leading in this field?
I love that. Yeah, my uh, answer to that is that I hope they see someone who did not lose that curiosity, who managed to keep it, and that's pursuing this field, that being a scientist. That's the gift, actually. It's the gift that you get to keep pursuing curiosity and asking questions and figuring things out, because that's the job. Well, that's part of the job. Of course, there are other
Mhm.
parts of the job, but that's something that I also uh, don't want to lose. And I guess I wanted to see that it's possible, right? And then another part of the answer is that they see someone who was oblivious slash bold enough to pursue a path that's not taken before, and you find your own way. And hopefully, and even now, you need to have sort of that boldness slash courage to pursue this path. But at the same time, the good news is that there are more of us who can guide you and support you. And that's the practical advice also, is to find that those like-minded peers and also mentors who can open the doors, opportunities, and also, and so that together we can make this a um, better place for then those who will come next, until hopefully it becomes taken for granted already. Okay, you want to do science, you're a girl, you want to be an engineer, it's no big deal. And then that's when maybe we don't have to celebrate Women's Day or Women's Month anymore. But right now, there's still that gap between what we wish to see and where we are. And so let's together help bridge that gap.
I really resonate with what you're saying about collaboration and maintaining that curiosity, because I can see how that might have been a discipline, that might have been something you had as a young person and was developed into a discipline as you practiced science. And now it informs your approach to leadership as well. Because I think at the end of the day, why that resonated with me is just realizing that our curiosity is what enables people to come into the circle and be part of what we're trying to do. And at the same time, understanding that whatever it is we're trying to strive for, in your case, having a stronger scientific community, a stronger practice here in the country, one that is more inclusive and diverse. It's a goal that we really can't accomplish on our own, and we really need to collaborate and bring in more people talaga in order for all of us to get there. And I can see how you being a scientist really informed as well your approach to how you're doing this advocacy.
Thank you. And we need allies from all, like with communicators, right? Because you need science, you need to communicate our science to different people, to policymakers, to young people, yeah, people in lawyers, so it's really just uh, 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 again, diverse, but parang, of course, because now I'm in the sciences, inviting people to, come work with us, come help us, and together we'll create a better world.
As we close our conversation, when you think and try to imagine the Philippines 20 to 30 years from now, what would it look like when you have all these people advocating for science communication, policymakers supporting the fields of science, our education system also encouraging more kids to get into STEM? Ano yung nakikita mong future that you're hoping would come true?
Yes, my hope is that a young kid, yeah, interested in science with a natural inclination for it, can develop those talents, can develop those skills, and and find a career, and thrive in a career in science, in STEM here in the Philippines, and not just in the universities, not just in academia, but in the private sector, in our industries, to build our innovations, our products and services for Filipinos and for the world. Also, in the government, we need more scientists in government, the nonprofit sector. So across all sectors, we have scientists contributing and leading fulfilling lives and careers.
Love it. Thank you so much, Reina, for joining us on this conversation. Where can people follow your work and the work of PhilSA?
Yes, so PhilSA is on, of course, we have a website, philsa.gov.ph, and we're on the socials, so Facebook and X and LinkedIn. So follow us and to learn more about the different initiatives and how you can participate and contribute. Um, I also on LinkedIn, Facebook. I just came back to Facebook actually, and I have a new profile called Doc Reina that anyone can follow or find or send me a request. Yeah, and also I have a website, reinareyes.com.
All right. Thank you so much, Reina. Maraming salamat.
Thank you so much for having me.
And that's it for this episode of Drawing on Hope. A big thank you to Reina for sharing their story and vision for a better tomorrow. If you found today's conversation meaningful, share it with someone who could use a little hope and inspiration. And if you want to hear more stories of change makers working to build a better tomorrow, don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review. It helps others find the show. Drawing on Hope is a show by Pushpin, a social impact design agency that uses drawings and stories to help make things make sense. Follow us at Pushpin Visuals on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, or visit www.pushpinvisuals.com. As always, keep drawing on hope, keep building a better world, and we'll see you next time.